and it was just kind of dive in because we don't have a lot of time. I will share some slides a little bit in a minute, but I wanted to kind of bring up sort of a provocation around modern psychology and Buddhist psychology. I should say Buddhist therapy and Buddhist and Western therapy. So we have to remember that a therapy is going to arise from a theory. This is really important. So if your theory is saying something, then obviously the therapeutic approach or intervention is naturally going to arise from a philosophy, a theory, a concept, right? So now we start talking about well, first of all, how problems arise and how we conceive of problems. Okay, and in this class and in Buddhist classes and Buddhist thought in general, we're not talking about all problems, are we? Are we? Are we talking about how to make more money because you can't pay your heating bill? Are we talking about that in Buddhist approach thought? Not really.
Not really. Though there are certain mantras, there are certain things that are supposed to make you more productive. I mean, there is a theme that goes on along that line to encourage people. If they do certain things, then yes, right?
Okay.
But that's not what we're talking about. I'm assuming here in Buddhist psychology, we're dealing more with our attachments and our difficulties in coping.
Right.
And being able to stay compassionate no matter what.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Good. Okay, so now we get into the meat of the thing, which is that why? Right? Why? What is the goal? Are the goals in modern psychology, and we're talking generally now, of course, okay, if that's okay, because kind of have to talk generally. Are the goals in modern psychology the same goals as in Buddhist psychology? Vanessa says no. Rolanda, I think, shaking her head no. I can't. Paula says no, and Jay is just looking very nicely out at me.
Kindly, and I don't want to talk too much because I have that tendency. But yeah.
So do I.
Yeah. Yeah, it could be dangerous between the two of us.
So this is very, very, very important. I want this distinction to be made now and early on. And I wish that there were a lot more people here to hear this. So you're going to have to spread the word, you guys, okay? The word is this, that it is not a one-to-one comparison. We have to look carefully, and for people who have some background in modern psychology know that we are looking at diagnosis. We're looking at, whether you call it formally diagnosis or not, what we're trying to do is trying to name the problem, okay? And depending on the modern theory, the theory that one is working with, we name it different things, okay? So if one in terms of Western or modern psychology is a I don't know, psychodynamic, then you're looking at problems and you're making sense of them a lot through the relationship with one's mother and the subconscious and the id and that sort of thing. Again, not going to go into any depth. If your mental model is family therapy, then you're looking at problems arising in terms of the family dynamics in your family. If your addictions model, then you're looking at the relationship of addictions and the problems. And so that saying that if you give a kid a hammer, everything becomes a nail. Heard that, right? That's what you find a lot in modern psychology, I think. Okay, not everybody, of course. Again, I'm generalizing. If your model is narrative therapy or constructivism, then you're looking at problems as having been constructed through language and narrative and social messaging. Okay, if it's family dynamics, again, it's where you are in the family, it's the dynamics. So you follow me, right? So none of those. So the reason then, if originally, and you still have to do diagnosis when you're claiming for insurance purposes, for example, and you go to the DSM 5 now, the DS DSM statistical manual, the one that has all the diagnoses, 294 diagnoses and a lot more sub-diagnoses. So you go into there and you're thinking like, wow, okay, so this is how I'm thinking of psychology. This is how I'm thinking, not just psychology, but solutions. So psychology rose in the West, ultimately is to help people with their problems, right? And so you have to think about, well, how does a problem exist? How does a problem exist? How is it created? So you go, again, I'm being I'm generalizing again, but traditionally you would go and you find a diagnosis, and a bipolar disorder or manic or a major depressive disorder or dysthymia, attention deficit disorder, trichotillomania, on and on, right? 294 or something like that. So it's quite interesting when you look at this, and this is pathology, and this is what we're trying to cure. And then you think, well, what is the goal of modern psychology? And it's not the same goal as Buddhist psychology. Ultimately, maybe it is in terms of inwardly, intuitively or in their hearts. But really, so you look in this manual and you look and you say, well, what are you trying to create? So pretty much again, I'm generalizing, pretty much what you're looking at is the relief from a mental disorder. Okay. So if you're going to see a therapist because you have you're feeling depressed or anxious, then really subconsciously, consciously, the goal is to become less anxious. Okay. Then you have to wonder. I wondered, because I think about these things when I was, being in a Buddhist monastery for 14 years. I was not a monk, but 12, 13 years. They're very challenging. Everything you say, they want to debate with you about this or that. Is it a cup of tea? Is it not a cup of tea? Is it a good cup of tea? Is it not a good cup of tea? Does the sun rise in the east or does the sun rise in the west? Everything's open to debate, and they love doing it. And so I'm sitting there, week after week, month after month, year after year, and I'm kind of going, well, the goal is just symptom relief in a sense, right? Help people not be depressed. Help people not be anxious. Help people not fight in their relationships. Okay. So in Buddhist psychology, you see, as you know, I'm sure everyone here knows, the baseline is that everybody wants to be happy. So when someone goes to work out their relationship, their marriage, or their relationship with a therapist, when someone goes to work out their addiction or problems, or when someone goes to a therapist, talk about they're feeling depressed or anxious, from the Buddhist perspective, the goal is they want to be happy. Okay. Nowhere did I ever see the definition of happiness. That's very, very strange. It's just, now again, I'm generalizing, but it's mostly around being reactive to a problem. And then the therapist's job, in a sense, could be relief of that problem. Now, by the way, there's nothing wrong with that. We want to help people. In Buddhist approach, that's not it, though. You see, that's not considered that much help. It's a little bit of help, but it's not really the purpose. The purpose in Buddhist psychology and Buddhist therapy is that we want people to be happy forever. Okay. So then the conceptualization of happiness and the conceptualization of problems are different. Okay. This is hopefully in the next 20, 30 years, modern psychology will begin to dive into these principles. I don't know, some of you may know, I wrote a book called The Misleading Mind. And I purposely left 3 topics out of that book because it was sort of introductory for me anyway. I left out karma, I left out rebirth, and I didn't get much into the nature of reality. So we can't really have a robust, complete psychology really without those 3. We have to, at some point, pull up our britches and start talking about them and start presenting them. So that's where we get the conceptualization. Yeah. So Jay, did you have a question?
I've got a comment, actually. Yeah.
Sure.
It's not a perfect comparison, but one of the things I think about with regards to Buddhist psychology versus Western psychology is holistic medicine versus Western medicine. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That you're with Buddhist psychology, the approach is more the whole person, right? Mm-hmm. It's not just simply dealing with a symptom. The goal in the whole thing is to deal with the whole person, right? What the goal is. The other comment I would make is, for me, and I've just dipped into it a little bit, found it quite helpful and helpful with clients, is there is now a move toward what's called positive psychology.
Yes.
Yeah. And I find that gives me optimism.
Yeah. Positive psychology has a lot of relationships with narrative psychology or narrative therapy. It has some really strong points. It's probably one of the stronger, more productive theories around, I would say, because it's not so pathologically based. What happens with narrative therapy and positive psychology as well, as from what I've seen, not an expert on it by any means, is in narrative therapy, they saw the danger of a pathological model, a model that's based on pathology, I should say. And so they pretty much dismiss it because they find it's not useful. It's not helpful to a client. It makes generally, and there's a lot of truth to this, it generally makes a person, like if you start talking about depression as working with depression, it reifies depression. It strengthens it. It concretizes it. Positive psychology and narrative therapies then have a relationship with pathology where they kind of shun them almost because they don't find it helpful, which I understand. What happens in Buddhist psychology and Buddhist practice is that the approach is that you have to understand the disorders. You have to understand the pathology. You have to understand what is referred to in Buddhist psychology, the afflictions or the disturbing emotions. So we have a way of, what I've noticed with what I noticed in spending my spiritual development in Nepal, in Asia, is that the Buddhists were very comfortable with talking about their mental disorders. Now, they didn't call them that. They called them afflictions, whether it's greed, ignorance, hatred, doubt, jealousy. Those are the typical terms that they use. They are very, very, what's the word? Very at ease with talking about these, because you have to know the problem in order to overcome the problem. And the reason they're comfortable with it is that from the very beginning of studying the disorders or the afflictions, there is another thing presented about the reason to understand these is because there's a goal, which is attainment of awakening, Buddhahood, whatever. Now, that's why when I very first started talking tonight, my rub with Western modern psychology is there hasn't been articulated what the end state is, other than symptom relief or to be free of a pathology. But there's again, Maslow did talk about this higher state of being. He did, and others have to. Jung did as well. But there's not really a path laid out, and it's not really in the forefront of the practice. Why you're working with your depression or your marital problems or fighting with your kids and all these sort of things. So for the Buddhist, and when you say the whole person, I'm not 100% sure what you mean by a whole person. But I will say that if it's including the body in Buddhist path, the body is not regarded as particularly. It is attended to. Don't get me wrong, but it's really the mind that is the focus. So when we talk about the whole person, I would say, the whole person meaning the whole mental person and the whole mental uh, makeup. It doesn't deny the body. It's just the body is seen as more of a reflection of the mind. So yeah, so I think that's probably what you meant anyway. But we're not looking at the body as a source to happiness. It's not the key. It is a vehicle that we have to treat well, and it's a vehicle that we need to be healthy. But why? So we can develop the mind, which is spiritual practice. Okay. That's probably what you meant, Jay, anyway. So, what was I? Okay. So a distinction between modern psychology and Buddhist psychology is the goal. Okay. The articulation of the disorders, whether it's afflictions from the Buddhist side or the disorders from the modern psychology side, is probably a little less important, but how they're constructed is very important. How problems arise is very, very important, and how problems are explained. Yeah. Let me see something here. Because Paul let me share very kindly, so you don't have to look at me too much. Can you see that? I just want you to see the dragon in the corner.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah. You know what? I figured out how to do that like 15 years ago. I never figured out since how to do it again. So now we read some of this last time. Do you mind if I just go through these again real quickly? To become your own psychologist, this is Lam Yeshe's words. To become your own psychologist, you don't have to learn some big philosophy. All you have to do is examine your own mind every day. You already examine material things every day. Every morning, you check out the food in your kitchen, but you never investigate your mind. Checking your mind is much more important. I think that's a pretty profound distinction about the Buddhist path, because when we talk about the Buddhist path, we really are committed to become mentally healthy. And the ultimate mental health is awakening. Okay. But it's not that there's just two ways of being, like unawakened and awakened. And if we're unawakened, we're a mess. And then somehow at some point we become awakened. And then it's not quite like that. It's a process. So there's a process of awakening, and the process of awakening, which can take, in the traditional literature, the process of awakening, Shakyamuni Buddha, who's our role model because he's the founder of the present day teachings back almost 2,600 years ago. So it's said that it took him 3 countless great eons from the day he started generating the path to when he finally attained full enlightenment. So, but in that period of 3 countless great eons, he was progressing from happy to happier, to happier to happier, to happier to happier. There are some, in that process, there are states of being where the happiness is very almost complete, but you still might be eons or billions of years away from enlightenment. Okay, so it's not to get worried, because even just entering the path and the mind to start to awaken, so when his mind entered the path, it was still another great eon before he realized reality, emptiness. Then he became a bodhisattva. Then it was 2 more great eons before he became enlightened. Anyone ever study the numbers of eon, what an eon is? If you have a square, I'm just playing around, okay? Because it's kind of fun. if you have, I don't think it's literal, but if you have a square pen that's 3 miles by 3 miles by 3 miles and 3 miles deep, and you put a sesame seed in there once, one sesame seed every 100 years, when you fill it, it'll be 1 eon. And a great eon is 20 of those. No, sorry, 80 of those. So it's something like 3 followed by 21 zeros, years. Who knows how long? Okay. So anyway, it's a long time that you're practicing. Now, there are other descriptions of the spiritual path that you can do it faster, as short as 1 lifetime, in fact. Have you heard of the great yogi Milarepa, for example? So Milarepa is famous for having attained enlightenment in 1 single lifetime. So don't get disheartened. So it takes time. Okay. Then, oh, I gotta do something here. However, whether you are religious or a materialist, a believer or an atheist, it is crucial that you know how your own mind works. If you don't, you'll go around thinking you're healthy, when in reality, the deep root of afflictive emotions, the true cause of all psychological disease, is there, growing within you. That's the difference between modern psychology and Buddhist psychology. So someone who is able to cure a cold, say, but has cancer. So the person doesn't know he or she has cancer will say, I'm healthy, right? But if you knew that person had cancer, you would feel a sense of empathy for the person, right? Even if they didn't know. And you would say, oh boy, only if he knew, he's not that healthy, right? So it's like that. So this is where, it becomes interesting in terms of helping people, because Lama Zopa Rinpoche said to me when I was writing the book, and it's in my book, he said, and he's telling me this as a therapist, he said, if you're just helping people feel better, there's not much benefit. And when he told me that, I was driving, he was in the back seat of my car, and one of his gurus, Cayton Rinpoche, was in the front seat. And when he said that, it was as if my whole professional life flashed before me. And I couldn't really see, I didn't see anyone that I came into the session with that I actually wasn't just focusing on trying to relieve them of their temporal suffering. It's like if they come in sad or distraught, that would disturb me, and I wanted to just take care of them. It's nothing wrong with that, by the way, but what he's saying is that probably in my case, where I had years of background in Buddhist psychology, is that, there's other therapists around who can do that. You should be helping, in a deeper way that you have the potential to, right? Does that make sense? And I didn't think I'd probably just didn't have the courage, is all. Okay. When in reality, the deep root of afflictive emotions, the true cause of all psychological disease, is there growing within you. So this Buddhist psychology and the Buddhist interventions, the Buddhist path, is focusing on that deep root of afflictive emotions. Often I often tell the story that I would go see, I'd be maybe in a depressed mood or something, and I go see Lama Yeshe or see Lama Zopa, and they wouldn't be patting me on the back to make me feel better. Sometimes I wouldn't feel any better once I left their room, because that's not what they were working on. They wanted me to be free of depression forever. Lama Yeshe, actually, the more depressed I got, the more rough he was with me. He was very, very tough on me. He was very strict. And so many times I wanted to leave. It just was too painful. I can't. Okay, yeah. Vanessa.
So I remember you mentioned that in another teaching about Lama Yeshe. Lama Yeshe said that, it's pointless to go into the practice to make someone feel better. I kind of feel like that's how most psychotherapists kind of operate in a sense, or that's what a lot of clients kind of seek, is just to go see someone to make them feel better. Is it just not effective because it's just temporary? Is that why Lama Yeshe said that?
Yeah. I think what we're focusing, again, to reflect on what it is every living being wants from life, actually. That takes a lot of courage. So what every being wants from life is to be happy. So then we start looking, we're in this quote here. Well, first of all, do we want them to be permanently happy, or do we want them just to feel temporarily happy? Of course, we need emergency room doctors and nurses. Do you know what I mean? They are there to help someone fix someone temporarily. They're not there to start preaching, helping the person practice meditation. They gotta save their life. So there is a place. There's no doubt. There's a place for this. I think it was a personal provocation because I knew more, not that I'm wise, not like that, but I had all this other education. So why aren't you operating on that knowledge? So once you know, right? Once you know, you can't unknow. Right. So helping someone temporarily, it doesn't really, let's think about that for a minute. So it's good if I'm not talking about suicide and those crises, but just someone not feeling good and they want to be happy. Then if in terms of wanting to be happy, I think we need courage because we want them to be permanently happy. Right. And that's not, again, this is very context related. If your children are, struggling at school, so they're being bullied or someone's picking on them, well, we want to give them tools that help them a longer term. Otherwise, just tell them go back into class tomorrow and beat up the kid, right? But we know that that's not the answer for the child. That we want them to develop longer term skills. It's the same kind of concept. It's the same concept. Does that speak to what you're bringing up?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's, if you don't have the skills to do this, then we can't do it. And I'm not saying I have the skills. I'm just saying that being exposed to it for so many years, I have to try. That I think. I'll give you an example, a really good example. I have to try. This is really interesting. So some years ago, probably about 15 years ago, there was a retreat that Lama Zopa Rinpoche was leading at the center nearby me, which is Land of Medicine Buddha. And I think there were like 100 people doing this retreat. And I wasn't doing it. And a family, an Asian family, got a hold of me and said, they're really worried about their father and grandfather. I think quite an elderly, maybe it was Taiwanese, I'm not really sure, gentleman who essentially was participating in the retreat, but he was barely eating and he was barely sleeping. And I think it was like 83. And he was going to every teaching and like that. And so they asked me to intervene, and so we got together as a family, with the family. And I said to this gentleman, I said, kind of, it's great what you're doing, but you have to take care of your health, and you don't need to go to everything, and you don't. I didn't say it this way, but like, don't take it so seriously, right? So the family was quite pleased I had taken that approach. And then about a day or two later, I got an admonishment from Lama Zopa Rinpoche. And he said to me, how do you know that advice you gave him was the right advice? And I understood, well, I don't know if I understood what Rinpoche meant. I had understood in my own way. That goes back to just making people feel better. There's not much benefit. I had this fantasy that this 83-year-old man was going to die soon, for example. I didn't know that. Yeah, I don't know if he did, by the way. And that the last thing, or the best thing he could do is be involved in the teachings and the meditations as much as possible, because he might die in a week. And it had nothing to do with having a little more food, a little more sleep. It's a point is we don't know. The point is, and it takes courage to act in a way that's focused on the goal, and the goal is awakening. And I'd like to just take this chance also. If again, I'm not a very good example of this, but another way to conceptualize how to be helpful is to focus on what are referred to as sort of the 3 levels of goals. Okay, this is very traditional. This is very traditional. So don't get too rigid about it. So the 3 levels of goals is, the first one is not having anything to do with feeling good, feeling happy. Nothing. It's not even mentioned. The first one is make sure you take care that your future and your next life is going to be positive. Okay, it's very profound. I'll explain in a minute. So that's a very basic level of being helpful, fundamental level. Now, of course, that again, don't rule out what I was saying about emergency room doctors and nurses, and someone's committing suicide or threatening to, or someone's extremely depressed. Of course, you give a warm hand and warm heart and you help them. So I just want, this is philosophically speaking, okay? But philosophically speaking, it's only helpful if it has impact on their next life, on your future life, next life. Or in the next second level is helping a person or yourself become liberated from problems. Okay, liberation. These are all psychological states, by the way. And the highest level is full enlightenment, full awakening for the benefit of, so you can help others. So those are the 3 levels of focus. Now, the reason it's so, we just don't think like this in modern psychology, but let's take a risk for a second. Okay, everyone want to go on a little, trying to unshare, everyone gonna go on a different, you mind going on a little exploration with me? Just, I don't think you mind. You don't have a choice anyway.
Fine.
Okay. So the exploration would be, remember I talked to you about the 3 things I left out of my book: karma, future life, and reality. Why do I say future life? Why is that important? Do you know, sorry, this is just me being silly. Do you know how many mosquitoes there are in the world? Of course you don't, right? Sorry. Maybe you do. I looked it up and I found a mathematician who said there, I think the number was 13 quintillion. 13 quintillion is a number followed by 13 zeros, I think. Okay, so my question, and I'm in a supportive audience here. Where did who are all those mosquitoes? I looked up ants also, and there's more ants than mosquitoes, by the way. Now we got plankton, we got barnacles, we got birds, we got flies, we got wombats, we got seals, and we got fish, and we got, I really kind of wonder how many animals are there on this planet, including, the insects are in the animal realm, right? It's kind of uncountable, isn't it? It's a limited number, but we could never count it. Okay, that's only one realm, the human and animal realm. We have 6 realms, right? Everyone knows that? 6 realms. Anybody not know that?
I had an idea, but I did not know the exact number.
The 6 realms are the human realm. There's 3 higher realms and 3 lower realms. The 3 higher realms are human, and then what are sometimes referred as the asuras or the demigods, and then the god realms, which is like probably angels and things like that, and other, like in the Hindu tradition, a lot of their pantheon of deities are considered gods, from the Buddhist perspective. And in the Buddhist pantheon too, there's a lot of gods. Now the thing about gods, okay, then the 3 lower realms are the animal realm, the spirit or hungry ghost realm, and then the hell realms. And so all of these are inhabited by countless beings, and there's many countless universes that have all these 6 realms. So it's unfathomable. It just gives you a headache to even think how many beings are there, around. It's just, well, you can't. It's inconceivable. But just on this planet, say that's what you can look at those. And the realm with the least beings is the god realm, and the second least is the demigods, and the third least is the human realm, and then the animal realm, and then the spirit realm, and then the hell realm has the most number of beings. So I think it's good. One thing I really feel thankful for in getting older, I mean, like this age, is that I think about death a lot, and I take it seriously now. When I was younger, I used to love meditating on death, but it didn't seem so tangible. Now it's like every day, right? I don't know if other people feel that way. Anyone else feel that way?
Yes,
Okay.
definitely. Though I have to say, and obviously age-wise, I know I'm close, really close. But in my heart of hearts, it amazes me because I've worked 8 years in palliative care.
Right, that's right.
There is a certain part of my mind that really does not believe it will
Yes.
happen. It's inconceivable that that's still there, but it is.
I appreciate that. We can talk about that a little bit more maybe next week. The book, I'm thinking if I write another book, Jay, it's called The Myths We Live By. And by myth, there are certain conceptions within the mind, a human or everyone's mind really, that are misconceptions. And we live by those. And they're not learned. They're actually, sort of what quote unquote inherent. One of them is we have the myth of immortality. It's just something we have. And so you just brought it up perfectly. The meditator, or I should say the spiritual practitioner, cultivates the truth of mortality. And someone like, people who are real, like Lama Zopa Rinpoche and His Holiness Dalai Lama, Lama Yeshe, and many others, they actually have the awareness of death. It's like the only way I can describe it. They have the awareness of death. They don't have the awareness of immortality, which is kind of a permanence. We can talk about that at some point, but that's exactly right. Isn't it amazing? It's just a trick of the mind. It's just what it does. So that's not a reality. That's not a truth. The truth of immortality is not a truth. So the truth of mortality is true. And then we die and we transmigrate. So helping, if I just like feel depressed and then I want to feel better, I can just smoke a joint, or I can have a drink, or I can talk with a friend. All those things do not, or talk with therapists, although it takes some medication, those do not guarantee my next rebirth. And if you look at the number of beings in these realms, being a human being is extremely precious. And here we are. We are so, and we're not even in Ukraine. We're not, they're humans too, by the way, but they don't have, they're right now, we wouldn't say that they have what's referred to as a perfect human rebirth. They have a human rebirth. There's a designation. There's designation of what's referred to as a perfect human rebirth. I can't speak for you guys, but generally we would say we have a perfect human rebirth. Look at us. We're here able to talk about these things. We probably have food for tonight. We have, basically good faculties. We can meditate. we're in a country that's not at war, or in an area that's not at war. We are live in an area where there's freedom to practice spiritual pursuits. That's what's referred to as a perfect human rebirth. And the preciousness of it is so rare, because if you look at the 7 billion plus people on the planet, I would, you don't have to answer this, but I think about, well, how many of those people would I rather be? Like if I could be one of them. And honestly, there's maybe like 100 or something, which is statistically not measurable, isn't it? I mean, I think do you feel the same way? Anyone else? You thought about that?
Sorry, about what, like death or transmigration?
About what incredible.
Oh, a rebirth.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I do think about that. Especially with my mom, she recently passed away like a little bit more than a year ago. And that was like the first time I really experienced death.
Yeah.
And she was a very giving person and didn't, she gave money to family, and to a point where I think she was getting taken advantage of. But so I just wonder, like, in her next life,
where is she?
Yeah, where is she?
Right. So we don't know. So that's where Lama Zopa said, if you're just helping people feel better, the lowest focus of a spiritual practitioner is to work on next life, right? It's not denying this life at all. Actually, it's to enrich this life. So we start looking at, well, what are some things that are going to help better guarantee? I mean, I at least want to have what I have now, right? I mean, the opportunities. I want to actually be nice to be even better. But what date did your mom die, by the way?
January 20th, 1921. Or I'm sorry, 2021.
Do you know that January 19th, did you say?
20th.
My mom died 2 days before yours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. How old was your mother?
She was 60, I think she was 68, either 67 or 68. She was born in 53.
Oh, she's young.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Brain cancer. It came back remission and then came back really aggressively.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Did she have a lot of pain?
No.
Oh,
not.
Good. Good. And how was her mood when she died?
She was peaceful. I mean, she, because it was the brain, it affected her speech. So she couldn't really communicate, but I can tell she would nod her head yes or no when I would ask if she's happy, And
did she say yes?
Yeah, she said yes. And I asked her, are you sad? And she's like, no. So I think she was peaceful because, we had her at home. I wanted her to pass away at home as opposed to the hospital.
Yeah, good.
So yeah, I try to make things as peaceful and
good.
as I could.
Very good. Yeah. So, there you go. We'll be like that too, right? Each one of us, and have been countless times. So we got lucky. Lucky is not exactly the right word. It sounds kind of random, but we're lucky this time. Look where we're at. So we want to guarantee that we have as good, if not better, situation next life. So that's the meaning of happiness. That's the meaning of happiness. Until we attain full awakening, the meaning of happiness is to have conditions like we have now. Things like, resources, being in a country that's at peace, being in a place where, there's spiritual practices and spiritual practitioners and there's spiritual teachers, and having the opportunity and the resources to practice those things. Because if you look at, when you walk around Nepal or India, there's these whole, they've changed a lot now, but, we'd say those holy countries, and yet, there's a lot of people who just had to till their farms and make a living, and despite walking past these monasteries and these stupas and these statues and all that, they couldn't actually participate in that lifestyle. So it's very much subjective experience in many ways, but objectively we want to be in a peaceful place, no wars, spiritual teachings, spiritual teachers, spiritual friends, have all of our, healthy body, and that sort of thing. A peaceful family, a good family, that sort of thing. So it changes. So that's now it's interesting that when we focused on just that next life, for example, that will make us mentally much more mentally healthy this life. Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. Do you know what I mean? Because it creates a sense of contentment. And if I were to say what is the definition of health in Buddhist psychology, I would say it's a balanced mind. A balanced mind, not the full awakening, which is balanced, of course, but just for us, us regular people, to have a balanced mind. And a balanced mind arises through contentment, doesn't it? Through contentment. Okay. So going back to what Jay brought up last week, now we see why anger, I think Jay was talking about anger last week, brought it up anyway. Now we see from anger, now we have a different way. So I imagine if you go to, again, I'm being simplistic, okay? But if you go to a therapist and say, well, I'm really angry, I have a lot of anger, I'm angry at, my boss because he doesn't treat me with respect. And like, well, you should talk to your boss. No, I've talked to him. And then, eventually it's like, well, what they tell you is, okay, go for a lot of walks or beat some pillows. Remember the old days? It was like beating pillows or something like that. Go out into the forest and scream as loud as you can. And I mean, I know I'm being simplistic, but the point was that you just relieve the anger. And so from the Buddhist perspective, why is anger a problem? Is because it's not a content mind. It's a disturbing mind. So if we ever want to know what our purpose is in terms of Buddhist psychology and Buddhist therapy, it's to check up on, like Lama Zopa was saying, check the mind and see if it's disturbed. So when we're sort of new, not just new, but I guess in the preliminary, the earlier stages of our practice, we are working on the more disturbing afflictions, anger being one of them. It's a very disturbing one, isn't it? As the practitioner becomes more and more subtle, then we begin to see that pleasure, which is what most people live for, more pleasure, less displeasure. We begin to see that pleasure for the mind is also unhealthy because it disturbs the mind. But that's as we become more subtle. So like the most subtle happiness is the balanced mind. I mean, the most subtle is a very focused mind, like the mind of mindfulness or samadhi. Okay, so for the person who is in touch with that quality of mind, the pleasures that were being sold every day, in terms of new cars and better houses and all those things, doesn't allure us. It doesn't attract us because you become much more subtle, much more sensitive. That those are disturbing my mind. It's like when we think falling in love is like the goal in Western culture. It's like, but then if you're from the point of view of developing a balanced mind, all of a sudden you start trying to meditate and you're attracted to somebody. It's like you can't meditate. And we thought that falling in love or being attracted to someone was isn't it that sort of the nirvana of the material culture, I guess you'd say, that and maybe success and fame and those kinds of things. Now you look into those and they're, from the point of view of a balanced mind, they're quite disturbing. It doesn't mean that anger and rage are not worse than pleasure. In a way, they're worse, right? At least with pleasure, you get some sense of pleasure, but as we become more healthy, pleasure is not the goal because it disturbs the mind. Okay. if pleasure were the goal, then we should just drink all the time or smoke or, but we can say it doesn't work anyway. Pleasure anyway turns into disturbing states of mind. So, so that's kind of my rave today. That leaves us 2 minutes to, if you want to debate with me, tell me I'm wrong, or say what you're thinking, or any thoughts. I'd like you to share them if you can for a couple of minutes. If you
So you
have
said
any.
that like when you pleasure is always going to lead to, did you say like suffering or misery?
What's that? Pleasure?
Yeah,
Always.
really. So I mean, how do you enjoy, like a glass of wine or a nice dinner?
You can. So the Lama used to say, you people don't even know how. He said to me, you don't even know how to make a cup of tea. And he'd be sitting there with his beautiful. He loved beautiful things in China. He gave them all away, of course, but in drinking tea, he had this big smile on his face, or like that. What he meant, he said, and he said, I don't understand you Western people. You're trying to renounce everything in your culture, but you have such great things in your culture. It's like, what? What are you trying to say then? He would say, you should enjoy the things in your culture. Just don't grasp.
But then that's pleasure though.
Just don't cling. Pleasure, there's nothing wrong with pleasure.
Because
That's the mistake. That's the mistake that we make. And that's the mistake us new Buddhists make. Oh, I can't have pleasure. He said, no. The problem is not the pleasure. The problem is clinging to it. He would have pleasure. Even in the advanced practices, you have pleasure arise. You do. Who doesn't want pleasure? But you can't cling to it. And so the suffering comes from the clinging, because pleasure always dissipates. It never lasts. So the pleasure of, I like the example of heroin. Okay. If that's like, for some people, the nirvana, right? It's like the greatest pleasure, but we see it does what it does. So, and by the way, it's very hard not to cling to pleasure. But as we advance, we won't. We will have pleasure in our path, in our life, and we won't cling to it. That's by the way, that's from the point of view of the Vajrayana practice. In the Theravada practice, then pleasure is blocked. That's why there's a lot of vows and a lot of restrictions, and that's very relevant for many of us. If you're an alcoholic, don't go in a bar. And you're trying to become clean, I mean. But for the Vajrayana, it's like they could drink alcohol and transform it, because there's no clinging. You can't do these pleasures if you're clinging. You're not allowed. It's not allowed in that sense. So for us beginners, I think the main thing is to be wary of pleasure, or clinging to pleasure, and then seeking it out. I think that's where we become mindful. Does that make sense? Yeah. Any other comments? These are all my opinions, and you should go check it, see if I'm right. I might be wrong. So you can research them this next week. Let's see.
Just one comment that I will make is,
Sure.
When we talk about happiness, and particularly happy, when I hear the word, I respond because I think of happy meal, that it seems like a shallow way of describing what we're talking about. And I think Bob Thurman talks about another possible translation of the word.
What is
and
it?
I'm just wondering because human beings it's more than happiness. It's like you're wanting to be fulfilled.
Yeah,
That feels like our actual goal.
fulfilled.
To me, a more meaningful term. That's just my.
Good, yeah. Yeah, I think we have a little struggle with the term. I used contentment, which can sound kind of boring in a way. Fulfilled is a good word. I like fulfilled. Of course, we have to define it and see what we mean by that. But I like the word fulfilled. Is that the word that Thurman uses?
I can't recall. Sorry.
Yeah, see if you can find it and bring it. Let us know.
That'll be hard. But it does. When I look at what we seem to be in terms of Buddhism, and in terms of any spiritual goal, that seems to be what we're looking for. It's not happiness doesn't seem to quite capture it, everything.
Yeah, I think that the problem, I agree with you. I think the problem with happiness is it tends to be like a feeling, right? I feel good. And for sure, we're not talking. I mean, a byproduct is feeling good, for sure. You know, and we're not going to feel bad, but it is. I think we have to keep mulling it over. I think fulfillment is one, but then we think about, we have to sort of define fulfillment too, don't we? You know, if you're talking to your neighbor and you say, well, what I'm into is fulfillment, and then they're going to ask you, what does that mean? And then we have to sort of, we're on the spot again. Okay, I'll let you go and see you next week. And then just think for a moment that the energy we've created together, mostly, I'm sorry I talked all the time, most of the time, but whatever thoughts we generated that are positive, then we dedicate those to attainment, at least of a perfect rebirth. If we're going to take rebirth, there will be a benefit to others and a benefit to our spiritual path, so that we're only focused on becoming completely fulfilled for the benefit of helping others fulfill themselves along the path, you know, to support others. Okay. Good night. Thank you, guys.